You got Tampa's like Godwin. We'll franchise you. Levante David. We'll figure it out. Shaq Barrett. Let us call a math professor. We'll just work the numbers. There's everybody there, and then Tom's going to rework his, and they're going another guy. New rule.
So Aaron Rodgers is protected.
Aaron Rodgers
from the Buccaneers.
He's a made man on this
from
show against Tampa.
Or just Tampa. Okay.
Yeah, he's got to beat Detroit.
Okay.
He's a made man on this show against Tampa this year. I think they host Tampa. Yeah, they're on the schedule. So I was thinking about this. Listen, you all know the rule. 90% of you know the rule. If you've listened to me for any time, there are certain teams and certain players I'm going to talk about, okay? Steph Curry, LeBron James, James Harden, Kevin Durant, New York Yankees in baseball, Ohio State football. They've got a huge brand. Dallas Cowboys. Like you all, I'm not telling you anything that 99% of you don't know. I'm not going to spend Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence for the first time in my life. I'll talk Jags football. But by and large, a third of the NFL just doesn't get on the show. Unless you have like a star quarterback or there's a controversy. And you know this to be true. And this is the reality of our business. If I don't get a rating, if Joy don't get a number, we don't have a show. They're putting up bars. We got no show, and we're just sad. So we got to talk about stuff that the majority of people care about. So the Dallas Cowboys are literally every year the number one rating on every network. If they're on the NFL network, it gets the best rating of the year. Fox best rating, NBC best rating, CBS best rating. But when Dak was signing a contract, I thought about this driving home yesterday, is that if you take out the Dak Prescott contract discussions, Joy and I talked about, if you just took those out, he's a quarterback, it's the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, Dak, we talked about. If you took those conversations out last year, it's the least I've ever talked about the Dallas Cowboys. We talked about that during the season. Very rarely. They just didn't make the lead on Mondays. They weren't interesting enough. The head coach is boring. The quarterback, Dak or Andy, don't have a lot of sizzle. And I was thinking next year, if you put Dallas's 7 best players on a piece of paper, and this morning I was thinking, Zach Martin, Jalen Smith, Amari Cooper, DeMarcus Lawrence, Dak, Zeke. I think CeeDee Lamb's pretty special. That's their 7 best players. And I kind of struggled with the 7th. Zeke, by the way, is regressing. DeMarcus Lawrence is regressing. And Amari Cooper feels overpaid now. Let's take the best team in the NFC. Tampa Bay, 7 best players. Brady, Mike Evans, Shaq Barrett, JPP, Tristan Wirfs, Levante David, Chris Godwin, and I couldn't stop. Because Devontae White made a Pro Bowl. Vita Vea is their highest-rated defensive lineman. Antoine Winfield Jr. is about as good a rookie safety as I've seen in years. And I'm not done. Like, Tampa's got like 14 special players. Dallas is a big brand. There's not a lot of special there. I mean, you asked me this morning, CeeDee Lamb has a chance to be really special. He looked really, really good. Offensive line used to be special. It's in rebuild mode. I mean, last year, people forget this. When Dak was healthy, they started the year 1-3, and the win was on a miracle onside kick recovery against awful Atlanta, or they're 0-4. Well, now you've paid Dak $40 million. I was talking, actually had dinner last night with an NFL owner. And there's certain things he can't say and can say. But we were talking about the salary cap and this misinformation by the media that it's just going to explode over the next 4 years. No, it's not. It's just going to go up gradually. $40 million for Dak is going to be a lot of money for the entire contract. And and the only way when you don't have a bunch of special players to get special players, pay for them, you can't afford it, or crush the draft. And that's hard. New England doesn't crush the draft. Crushing the draft, and not a lot of people crushing the draft for stars. Jimmy Johnson on the show yesterday talking about this.
I think he's a great leader for the team. I think the team really rallies around him. He could make plays with his legs. He could run the football. And he fit into their system. He has had problems at times being inaccurate. He can win you a championship if he has great players around him. I don't think Dak can carry a football team if he doesn't have great players around him.
And he doesn't. And the only way to get him is paying for him. And I looked at Dallas' schedule next year. They face a lot of teams next year with special players. Arizona, Tampa, Kansas City, Chargers, Vikings, Saints. Those are all on the road. So you start looking at that schedule. There's a lot of teams on that schedule with special players. So I can love Dak, but I was just thinking about this when I drove home. I was just like, they just don't have a lot of special players. It's a great brand, but there's not a lot of sizzle to it. Kansas City's got sizzle. Rams got sizzle. Green Bay's got some sizzle, needs more. Buffalo's got sizzle. Tampa's got a ton of sizzle. Seattle's got some sizzle. There's some sizzle in this league. There's like, whoa, those are great. Arizona's got a couple guys you're like, wow. Chandler Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray. Where's Dallas's? Best player is probably a guard. That's it. I mean, the Colts last year, Jonathan Taylor, end of the year, the running back, you're like, oh, okay, that's a star. Michael Pittman, oh, it's a star. I mean, it's not wrong with having a great guard, Quentin Nelson, but it's just fun. You know, I sat driving home, I'm like, Dallas is just not a topic as to me. If they start out 5-0, I'm not going to say I'm not going to cover them, but I don't know. There's not a lot of there. Joy with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
Well, there's a lot going on this NFL offseason. The Saints are releasing wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders.
Just saw that before I went on the show today. Yeah.
In his one season with New Orleans, he was second to Alvin Kamara in receiving yards with 726 and 5 touchdowns. He confirmed the news on Instagram, saying, New Orleans, it's been real. Sucks we didn't bring a Super Bowl to the city, which was the goal when I signed, but it was a blessing to showcase my talents in front of you guys week in and week out. Hashtag blessings on blessings. Hashtag I'm a free agent. Hashtag where to next.
I got to tell you something. Kenny Galladay's on the market. Hunter Henry's on the market. Emmanuel Sanders on the market. You can't tell me. We should get Emmanuel Sanders on the show today. Like, he's by the way.
He's very productive. He was second in receiving on the team.
Not only productive, he walks into your team and figures the offense out in an hour. San Francisco, he was there a week. And you're like, oh, he's a go-to guy.
He's extremely valuable. He's a great locker room guy.
Figures it out fast.
And he's still very productive. So obviously the Saints were going to have to make some moves because they were in cap hell. So he was due to make $8 million this season with $2 million guaranteed. So the Saints will save at least $4 million against the salary.
New England
by releasing him.
Oh, by the way, Green Bay. You want to have a second receiver instead of grasping in the draft? Devontae Adams 1, Emmanuel Sanders 2. You already have a really productive tight end.
Maybe we can write a letter and
envelope and then put it in our sedan and drive it to
Green Bay, and they will get it. By the way, nobody's licking envelopes right now, right? I voted the other day and looked at the envelope and it had the sticky stuff you're supposed to lick, and I was nah, definitely not licking that. It's going to be a sponge.
Somebody's doing it.
I am not licking envelopes right now. Lamar Jackson is one of the next young quarterbacks in line for an extension. So we got done talking about Dak Prescott's contract. Now we get to talk about Lamar Jackson's contract. Hopefully it does not go as long. The Ravens are looking to lock him in long term, but GM Eric DeCosta admits that the money Dak Prescott got gives an idea of what Baltimore will have to pay for Lamar.
If you go to the Bentley dealership or the Range Rover dealership, you know what the cars are going to cost. You're not going to get much of a discount. They all cost about the same, and you go in there and you're going with the idea that you're either going to buy the car or you're not going to buy the car. And we're confident and committed to trying to get a long-term deal done, and hopefully we can get that done at some point, in the near future. It may take a little time, but we're willing to try.
I like that attitude.
I like that attitude, too.
You got to pay for good stuff.
You do. He's the franchise quarterback. He's league MVP. Pay for him.
My wife says that when people say California's expensive. She always says, so's filet mignon. It's the best weather in America. It costs money. You can get it for free. You want no taxes, go to Wyoming. The weather stinks. Nothing against Wyoming, but
you also can be at the beach in 20 minutes from
and ski,
almost anywhere in
and
the
never
city.
Leave the state for a vacation.
Yeah.
I never have to leave the state. I can go anywhere.
You can go ski.
Palm Springs,
you can hike,
Malibu.
You can get the desert. Yeah, that's how it works.
It's expensive.
Obviously, Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson, many would argue, have a talent gap, seeing as Lamar Jackson was the MVP of the league.
Well, Lamar does something better than any player in the league.
Extremely talented. And we think has a massive ceiling and is going to be very productive in this league. But to Eric DeCosta's point, you have to pay for your franchise quarterback, which is why this whole situation with Dak Prescott was so confusing, because they should have done this first. They should have prioritized locking up Dak Prescott. They probably could have gotten him for cheaper at that point if they had done the deal early, and maybe Dak Prescott would have been more willing to take a long-term deal if they had come to him early rather than prioritizing everyone else on the team.
Well, I trust Baltimore more than Dallas. So what Baltimore did, which is smart, is they draft him, he's free, and they give him a bunch of good players, veterans, they bring him on. And now when he gets